I was born in Germany, and I lived in a village in the Black Forest of Germany. And when Hitler came to power in 1933, I was 8 years old. And my parents very quickly realized that Germany was no longer a place to raise, if you're Jewish, to raise a family. And so they tried to leave, and they were willing to go anywhere in the world. But their efforts became increasingly more desperate to get out anywhere, just to get out of Germany. But there was one place they were not willing to go to, and that was Palestine. And the reason for that was because my parents were anti-Zionists. Is there someone in the audience who perhaps doesn't know what Zionism is? If so, please raise your hand, and I'd be happy to, okay, I see at least one hand. I'm going to read a statement to you what Zionism is, just one sentence. Of course, there's much more to be said about it. Zionism represents itself as a political movement concerned principally with the establishment of a state in Palestine to be controlled by and for Jews. And my parents were, and we lived in a village, and my parents were, I think, the only ones in the village who were anti-Zionists. And as a young child, I didn't really fully comprehend what Zionism or anti-Zionism is. But if my parents were anti-Zionist, then I was an anti-Zionist. And all the Jewish children in the village belonged to a Zionist youth group. I was the only Jewish child who did not belong because my parents did not allow it. Initially, my parents decided that we want to leave Germany when we have that opportunity to leave as a family unit. But after my father came back from the concentration camp Dachau, where he was for 4 weeks in November, December of 1938, the decision was made that if one of us has the opportunity to leave, then that person will leave, and hopefully the others can follow soon thereafter. And thanks to my parents' great love, they literally gave me life a second time when they sent me on a Kindertransport or children's transport to England. I left Germany on May 18, 1939. There were about 500 of us on this particular transport. And England, in the 9 months preceding World War II, took in almost 10,000, mostly Jewish children, and would have taken more except the war broke out. So I also want to say thank you, since I'm here in England, I want to say thank you to the British government at that time for having given us almost 10,000 children the opportunity to come here. I remained in written contact with my parents, and once the war broke out, you could no longer correspond directly, but you could send 25 words through the Red Cross, and that's how we stayed in touch with each other. And then on October 22nd, 1940, all the Jews from the area where I come from, southwest Germany, were deported to a camp which was located in what was then Vichy, France. Vichy, France collaborated with the Nazis, and there were several camps along the border between France and Spain. Men and women were separated in the camp, separated by barbed wire. In March of 41, my father was sent to a camp near Marseille, and then in July of 42, my mother was sent to a camp near Perpignan. And then I received a letter from my father dated August 9, 1942, in which he said, "Tomorrow I'm being deported to an unknown destination, and it may be a long time before you hear from me." And then I received a letter from my mother dated September 1st, 1942, in which she said exactly the same thing, adding that she hopes to meet my father somewhere along the way, and then we will carry our lot with dignity and with courage. And then I received one more communication from my mother, dated September 4th, 1942. It was a postcard in which she said, "Traveling to the east, and saying a very final goodbye to me. And those two communications were the last that I received from my parents. They perished in Auschwitz. I didn't learn that they were sent to Auschwitz until July 1956. I received 2 letters from a French organization telling me that they were sent to Auschwitz. And since they were never heard from again, I have to assume that they either died on the way or in Auschwitz itself, as well as other family members, those that survived the camps in France. After the war was over, I went back to Germany to work for the American government. I had a contract for 1 year to work for the U.S. Civil Censorship Division, censoring incoming and outgoing German mail. And before that contract expired, I decided I wanted to stay longer in Germany, but I didn't want to continue censoring mail, because that was really boring, reading other people's mail. And I learned that by the Nuremberg trials, they were looking to hire people, and I applied, and I was hired to look for the documentary evidence to be used by the prosecution in the trial of the Nazi doctors who performed medical experiments on concentration camp inmates. And most of my work was actually not in Nuremberg, but in a former Nazi document center in Berlin. And I continued to work in Nuremberg even after that trial was over, and helped out on some of these other subsequent trials. And left Germany in March 1948, came back to England, was in London for about 10 weeks, and then in May of 1948, I left for the United States and arrived there about the same time that Israel became a state. And I remember having some very mixed feelings about that. On one hand, I was very happy that there was a place for those who survived the Holocaust to go to, because they either chose not to return to their place of origin or maybe couldn't go back there. But on the other hand, remembering my parents' ardent anti-Zionism, I was afraid that somewhere down the road, no good would come of this. What that might be, I couldn't possibly imagine. But I was new in the United States, and new impressions, new things to learn, and new people to meet. And so Israel and Palestine were on the back burner of my interest, and remained there for quite a long time. And then in 1982, I received what you might call a wake-up call. I learned about the massacres in the 2 Palestinian refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila, located in Lebanon. And I needed to find out, what was that all about? Who was responsible for this? Who was adversely impacted by it? And what happened between 1948 and 1982, when I paid very little attention to that part of the world? And the more I learned, and the more I understood, the more I became distraught